Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this week's webinar. Appreciate you all being here. My name is Dylan Baker. I'm one of the co-founders here at Spectacles, and I'm going to be hosting today's webinar. I'm really excited to have Michael and Jonny from Canva joining us this week. They have built a truly awesome piece of technology on top of Looker that they're going to tell you the whole journey behind building and ultimately how they generate alerts in Looker whenever there's data issues so that their end users can be notified, which I'm sure is a problem that any of us on this webinar who use Looker can identify with. So in just a second, I'm going to hand over to them. But before I do, just a couple notes. If this is your first time joining one of these webinars, we, the team at Spectacles, run these typically every 2 weeks, this time on a Wednesday. And it's really just to bring the Looker community together to highlight cool things that people in the community are doing, much like this use case from the team at Canva. It's not supposed to be salesy. It's really just supposed to be educational content that allows us all to improve our usage of Looker, learn new things, and get the most out of Looker as a platform. Unusually, we actually have a webinar. Normally, they're every 2 weeks, but we actually have one next week and the week after. So we've got 3 weeks in a row coming up. Next week, we're going to be teaming up with the team at Paradigm. They have just announced their Looker Spectacles integration into the Paradigm IDE. So we're really excited for them to showcase that next week. And then we'll be working with the team at Bytecode in 2 weeks' time, who are going to be talking about some of the work they've been doing with things like Looker Explorer Assistant and LLMs on top of Looker. So if you want to sign up for those, head to both our website, spectacles.dev. You'll see the webinars there. But if you're watching this on LinkedIn, you can also see it there and be able to register through my profile. But yeah, head to spectacles.dev. You'll see it all there as well. And so I'm now going to hand over to Michael and Jonny. I'm really excited to see this presentation. It's a really cool topic. They built something really cool. And so I'm going to hand over to them. They're going to present, and then I'm going to do some questions with them at the end. So Michael, Jonny, over to both of you.
Thank you very much, Dylan, and welcome everyone. My name's Jonny. I'm a data scientist at Canva, and today myself and Michael are going to give a presentation called The Final Line of Defense, how we created scalable alert banners for Looker dashboards. Unfortunately, the timing of this session was a bit early for us down in Australia, so we've recorded the session today, but we hope you all enjoy the presentation and hopefully you can take away some interesting ideas. So in today's session, we'll start with the problem we identified. Importantly, how the problem erodes the trust that our stakeholders have when using our dashboards, and why we decided to create alerting banners in Looker as a final line of defense. We'll describe the technical details of how we built a scalable solution using the Looker API, and we'll end by discussing some future plans we have for taking this solution further.
Great, but first, a bit about Canva. So Canva is a global online visual communications platform with a mission to empower the world to design. It's a simple way to create beautifully designed presentations, infographics, videos, documents, and websites. The company launched in 2013 and currently has around 190 million monthly active users. Canva has over 4,500 employees, and while we are headquartered in the land down under, we have offices and staff all over the world. So as data scientists, one of the things that Jonny and I are interested in is being able to empower our stakeholders to self-serve their data needs. Core to that goal is the trust that our stakeholders have in the data they are presented with, and that trust is very closely tied to the trust they have with the data teams. So at Canva, Looker is one of our main business intelligence tools and is used by thousands of employees each month to gather insights and make data-driven decisions. So we have a lot of data, we have a lot of content, and we have a lot of users interacting with Looker. So what happens when something goes wrong? So I think, as Dylan said, this is a problem that most of us would have experienced at some time. We've identified a data issue, something has gone wrong. The team has jumped into action to identify the problem and roll out a fix. So, with heroic efforts, the team fixes the issue in record time, and everyone pats themselves on the back. It's a job well done. But unfortunately, while the team was so focused on fixing the data error, the incorrect data was presented out to users who went ahead and used the data to make the wrong decision. And yeah, this is kind of like the worst case scenario, but it's definitely something that is front of mind with the team. So unfortunately, data issues happen, ranging from something as simple as the data being delayed all the way to the actual information being incorrect. So what can we do? In an ideal world, we'd want to catch errors before any users notice. I guess in an ideal world, there would be no errors, but then next best thing would be to catch errors before the users notice. To do that, at Canva, we've got numerous checks on our upstream layers. We have CI tools like spectacles, we have data tests, anomaly detection. But data is complex, and in real life, there's always the possibility that something slips through. And as mentioned in the previous slide, the worst outcome for us is our stakeholders encountering this incorrect data unknowingly and using it elsewhere. And this really breaks hard to build trust between stakeholders and the data teams. And it also leads to longer term pain as these stakeholders that have been burned once will kind of go back to asking the data teams to pull data for them, to create kind of reports that they could have previously self-served in a tool like Looker. So now we know that we want to let our Looker users know about data issues, but how are we going to do that? And I guess, as this final line of defense, one of the things we wanted to do was to be able to warn our users of these issues. And in the past, while we did things like announce them over Slack, which is like the main comms tool we use, we found it really difficult to reach the wide range of stakeholders that interact with Looker. And instead we thought, why don't we try to put notifications where the users are consuming the data? Why don't we try to put them inside the Looker dashboards themselves? And so we ended up going with, I think, what is quite a simple solution, but an effective one. We would just put like a prominent alert banner at the top of the dashboards where, it can't be missed by users. And then we'll put all the kind of relevant links for users to understand and discuss the problem a bit more. So this is like a simple mock-up banner on top of our mock-up data, but you can kind of easily customize the look. So you can match your company branding, your team branding, whatever you want. And the three main components of the banner, we have the custom image, we have a date so users can know, how recent is this issue, give them a TLDR to let them know what sort of issue they should be expecting. And then we always include some sort of link, whether the link is to an actual incident or just a channel where users can click through, learn a bit more and discuss with the data teams. And so at this point, we're feeling pretty good. We thought, this solution looks good. I think it will be effective. Other stakeholders also thought it would be effective. And so then we thought, what we're going to do now is try to roll this out across the company to everyone who's building dashboards. And we thought, we'll just create this detailed playbook, and then users are just going to have to, know what dashboards to update. In an incident, open them one by one. They're going to add the alert, which is a bit funky in the Looker UI. Have to remember the format, that it was prescribed. Inevitably, when updates appear, we have to go back and update all those kind of dashboards one by one. And then once everything is done and dusted, we'll then have to go back one last time to remove them. And as you can imagine, this process didn't quite work out as smoothly as we thought. So initial scope for this testing was kind of targeted at business critical dashboards, those that are widely used, closely maintained by data teams, used by key stakeholders. But even with this limited scope and kind of high importance dashboards, we just found, as the previous slides would have shown, it was too manually intensive. It was prone to human error. People would forget to update things or forget to remove them. And importantly, the team hated doing it. So, we thought, if our team hates doing it, how are we going to convince everyone else to adopt this? And we'd also attempted some other solutions that we'll just touch on really quickly. So we tried things like having Explore set up that would display these messages and try to link everything automatically in the back end. But these other solutions also failed. So while the alert banner seemed like the best idea, we couldn't get it to scale. And at this point, we kind of shelved the idea as being something that has good intentions, but it's a failure because we can't scale it any further. So we're at the point where we kind of knew there is a problem. We want to alert users. We have too many dashboards and stakeholders to do this kind of manually, and we're about to give up until we developed the Looker Alert banner script, or Labs for short. And I say we here, but full credit to Jonny for developing this great solution. And with that segue, I'll pass it back to Jonny, who will talk us through the implementation.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. Yep, so as Michael suggested, the Looker Alert banner script, or Labs as we like to call it, because everything needs a good acronym, is our scalable solution to deploying alert banners to Looker dashboards. So effectively, this allows us to place the right message on the right dashboards at the right time. So very broadly speaking, we had two technical problems to solve here. The first was, how can we leverage the Looker API to place and manage tile elements on multiple dashboards? And related to this as well, how do we define which dashboards we want to place the tile elements on? Secondly, how do we enable users to do this collaboratively? If I've placed a banner, how can another team member update or remove it using Labs? Now, I want to be clear that the solution that we've implemented is executed via a Python script. There's other ways to interact with the Looker API, so I've tried not to use Python-specific terms here. However, when I do go into detail, I want to be clear that the methods I reference are from the Python SDK, but the important takeaway is the underlying logic flow. So before we dive into the technical details, let's briefly look at Labs from the perspective of a user. So using Labs is really only a two-step process, with the first step actually being completed ahead of time before you have an incident. So this first step is just filling out the dashboard configuration file. It's just a JSON file. And this is where we label groups of dashboards with the type of data that they consume. We can see an example of this in the top right, where we have a list of dashboard IDs, which is just the number on the end of your dashboard URL. And we have a label here. So in our example, we've just labeled 4 dashboards with finance. And this enables groups of dashboards to be selected to receive banners based on what sort of data is being impacted by an incident. Step 2 is where we actually configure the details of our current incident when it occurs. This is where we put the information that will actually appear on our alert banner, and we define as well the relevant group of dashboards. So we can see in the example on the right here that finance group that we've defined in our dashboard config gets entered into our incident config. The incident configuration also involves defining an incident ID, which is this top incident, which I've called finance incident here, this top line. Labs will log this incident ID, and it will also log all of the dashboards that were involved, as well as the details that were placed on the alert tile. This will be important later. And really, if there is a step 3, it's just calling the script. So there's 4 important functions of Labs that cover most use cases. The first is, obviously, as we've just seen, creating new banners on multiple dashboards. The second is updating existing banners. As new information on the incident arises, we can edit the existing banners with new information and keep our users up to date. And of course, the third, if we're creating alert banners, we also need to be able to remove them from all of the dashboards that they were actually added to. So we have a small video here. It's fairly straightforward, but if Michael wouldn't mind just playing the video, it effectively shows as we add, edit, and then remove a dashboard alert banner. It happens pretty quick, but I think you get the idea. So if we just go back one more slide again, sorry, Michael. So the last point here is that we enable collaboration for these processes via a log file. So details from the incident configuration file are embedded actually in the alert tile, and this can be used to reconstruct a log of all of the current incidents that are on hand. And what this means is that if my teammate places alert banners, I can refresh my log, which will then be populated with the incident ID created by my teammate, the dashboards that received alert banners, and all of the information on those banners. And this then enables me to update or remove them as needed. What I'll also just finally mention here, just as an aside, I've mentioned these configuration files. This is definitely the quickest and easiest way to use Labs, but it's not strictly necessary. Labs also supports ad hoc runs where a user can just input everything via the command line and put a dashboard, an alert banner on a single or a group of dashboards, again, all from command line. So that being said, let's jump into the nitty-gritty, how it actually works under the hood. So starting on the left, before the API is even touched, we extract the information from our config files. Most of this gets converted into an HTML block, which is ready to be inserted into the looker tile element. Also in this block is an HTML tag that contains a string that flags the tile as being placed by Labs. This is important from that collaboration aspect, which I'll speak more about in a moment. Also, this HTML block, along with the list of dashboards, will then get passed to the write dashboard element method. Effectively, this specifies what dashboard we're putting a tile element on and what to put on that element. Next, we then just call the create dashboard element, which writes it to the dashboard. And importantly, this element that we create has an element ID property. This also gets passed to the log because we need this ID if we want to update or remove the banner at a later date. Next, when we create this banner, it actually by default gets created at the bottom of the dashboard, so it won't really do its job down there. So we need to move things around. So the first part of doing this is calling the dashboard layout method. This gives you a list of all the elements on your current dashboard. Effectively, we then cycle through these elements one by one, removing their positions down by one using the write dashboard layout component method. We then select the element that has an element ID that matches our newly created banner, and we move that element up. Each time we move an element, we save its new position by calling the update dashboard layout component method. And the end result is that our alert banner is displayed at the top of the dashboard. And really, in a nutshell, that's the simple process. So as I mentioned, when we create the alert banner tile, we need that element ID to update or remove it. And given all of this information exists in our log file, we were initially brainstorming ways of sharing the log file so that the teammates all had the same information. But we landed on a solution that I have alluded to that was even more simple. And users don't actually have to share log files. A user can refresh their own file by simply rebuilding it using the information that's embedded in the HTML in the Labs banner elements. So I'll explain. In the bottom right, we have an example of a log file entry for some example incident that involves just a single dashboard. This may have been placed by my teammate. And importantly, my teammate and myself have the same dashboards listed in our dashboard configuration file. So when I instruct Labs to refresh my log, it'll scan all of the elements on all of the dashboards that are listed in my configuration file. When a tile contains that HTML ID tag that indicates that this tile was placed by Labs, all of the purple text in the example log here can be extracted from the HTML on that tile. Because we've also selected that tile as we iterate through them, the element ID, which I've shown here in red, can also be extracted. The information just then needs rearranging into the format we see here in the example log and saved, and voila, we have the same log as all of our teammates. So how have we actually used Labs in Canva? So the script just lives in an internal repo for most teams to use at the moment. Teams have found that maintaining their own fork has been easiest. This basically just ensures that all team members have the same dashboard configuration file. To roll it out, we provided pre-recorded how-to videos. We presented it internally in various forums like show and tells. And we've also provided more hands-on support via Slack. Importantly, though, it's been written into our playbook for handling business incidents. So finally, the future of Labs. This has been a really nice proof of concept that we found incredibly useful, but where can we go to from here? And really, as with most workflows, we're aiming for more automation, more integration, which really means less manual tasks. For example, integrating Labs with Slack could enable users to run Labs from within a channel where an incident's being handled. This also has the benefit of transparency for everyone that's involved in that incident. We've also thought about some sort of trigger based on Spectacles runs. So if Spectacles flags an issue with a Looker view or Explore, labs could automatically place banners on associated dashboards until a later time when Spectacles no longer picks up the errors. Similarly, other integration to data monitoring tools where banners could be placed based on some predefined data condition like value ranges. And lastly, there's other use cases outside of just incident management for labs. For example, if we generalize the code base a little bit more and not have banners necessarily focused on alerts, but for data incidents, but just alerting the users to anything. We've, for example, used it for notifying users of dashboards that are never used that the dashboard's going to be archived. So pretty much with this kind of thing, it's as far as your imagination can take you, but thank you very much for listening.
Awesome. Thank you very much, both. That was super, super interesting. I've been just like writing down notes that I wanted to, I guess, ask some questions about. So, well, let's jump into that. For those who are watching, as Jonny mentioned, this is a recording. Australia and the UK don't have the most collaboration-friendly time zones for a 5 p.m. UK time webinar. So all the questions are going to come from me. But if you do want to ask questions, head to the Spectacles Slack, which you can find on the Spectacles website. There's a whole area there where you can ask more questions of both the Spectacles team, of the Canva team. We can have any follow-up happen there. So the first thing I wanted to ask you guys is, you obviously emphasized at the end there the desire, facilitating collaboration across this tool, allowing multiple people to run these things. In practice, how many people have ended up having to run this in its existence? Like, have you found it being like a small centralized team who actually end up doing most of the creating the dashboards? Or have you found that it's been effective in having kind of like, I know you have a very large number of people working in data at Canva. Have you found that you've had success in kind of like distributing the responsibility of running things like this?
It's a great question. So I'll say off the bat that I certainly haven't logged usage statistics of this. What I originally, with the way that we had things set up, there was a central team that was managing business critical dashboards. So they were the team that were mostly utilizing the tool. From a personal point of view, I have onboarded other teams into the tool that have been interested in using it. And these are teams, of varying sizes. So I know that it has been picked up elsewhere. But yeah, in terms of an actual number, I really couldn't say. Given that it is in our playbook for our business data incident handbook, I would say that, every time there's a data incident, which I think is not too often, which is good, it, in theory, would get used then.
Okay, that makes sense. And I guess a couple questions on a theme. I know this is a thing that people might want to replicate themselves. This is obviously a use case that makes a ton of sense. I'd be curious I guess to some degree in terms of advice for them, but also in terms of what they might expect building something like this themselves. What was the relative time of just like investigating the Looker API, identifying all the things that you had to do versus like the technical writing of the code in Python? Like, was it like 10% actually the API endpoints were very obvious and then 90%, hey, we need to write this, or flipped? Kind of what was that ratio of work as you went about building something like this?
So I think for me, initially, when I started writing this, I was fairly new to Canva at the time, and I was fairly new to Looker as well. So Looker as a product, as well as using Looker's API, was completely new to me. I think it was probably a split 50-50 for me. I think 50% of the time spent just, understanding what Looker was and the API. And then once I understood how it all connected together, writing the Python just came from there. And of course, there was a few iterations. There was a few problems to solve. For example, moving the dashboard alerting tile element to the top was something that was not straightforward. Even though it was in the end a simple solution, it took me a while to work that out. But yeah, about 50-50, I'd say.
Cool. And then, which leads me, I guess, to a next question, which is, as much as people might want to go off and, or they might want this solution and be aware that they could go and build this thing themselves, they might be thinking to themselves, well, the team at Canva have already built this. Is there any chance I'll be able to use what they've built? Is there any, obviously there's like lots of organizational issues around open source, but any plans to open source this in any way? Is that something you guys have thought about at all?
From a personal view, you know, I love open source, but yeah, certainly on that kind of decision is something that we'd have to go away and ask the right people at Canva and get permission to do that.
Cool. Yeah, makes sense. And then one of the things you kind of talked about the various places where you guys get alerted about data issues. So spectacles being one, obviously, but there's obviously many things pre-Looker, pre-spectacles. I think people might just be curious as to like what those tools look like at Canva. Can you just talk quickly about like what are the various tools and steps of the pipeline where you guys get notified about data incidents that might ultimately affect Looker?
Yeah, maybe I'll take a stab at this one without saying the names of any of the other vendors. But yeah, so I guess yeah, we have alerting kind of like all the way along the pipeline. So yeah, during like the actual refresh of all the data tables, we have like a ton of checks. Yeah, there's data tests in there that maybe would like flag, you know, some strange looking data has come through that we don't expect. Like maybe the downstream, like results or trends. Again, we're seeing data that we wouldn't expect to see. We also use tools once the kind of like data is live in our pipeline for specific like anomaly detection. So yeah, mostly utilizing some sort of like forecasting algorithm. And again, like whether we're using like auto thresholds or we have specific business thresholds. Again, those are all like being triggered along the way. All the way down to, yeah, I guess the, you know, what was previously like the final test, you know, like analysts or stakeholders that kind of check these numbers kind of like religiously every day, like as the data like refreshes. So yeah, we try to put in as many fail safes and safeguards as we can, like all the way through the pipeline.
That makes sense. I've got two final questions. Another thing that I think people might sometimes run into when trying to get approval to build something like this is having to make the case for it internally. Like it's a thing that I think data professionals know provides value and is important, but sometimes they're having to make the case to someone elsewhere in the business to say, no, this is a thing that we should actually spend a week, a month, you know, whatever it is building. Was that something that you ran into at all? Were you kind of, did you ever have to justify this to someone who needed this being explained, or was that was it a thing just within your team you were able to sign off on?
I think we're pretty fortunate in Canva that we do have a lot of trust placed upon us that if we think it's a good idea, then you know, the powers that be will often let us run with our imagination and do the thing that we think's worth doing. So no, there wasn't really a ton of convincing or pushback. I think as well, with multiple people having run through the scenario where you had to run through a bunch of dashboards and apply all of these alerts on manually, it became pretty clear to people that, oh yeah, we need a better way to do this. But yeah, not much convincing at all, thankfully.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
And sorry, Michael, go ahead.
Oh, so Dylan, I was just gonna say, yeah, I guess the other thing that helps is when you have like a data-driven like leadership team. So you know, if you have someone high up in your hierarchy that's kind of like checking these dashboards every day, I think that's again where you can kind of explain the value of doing this. Like, do you really want this dashboard to go wrong? And then person X to be like breathing down your neck to try and work out like what happened. I think that's another maybe way that teams can demonstrate the value of doing something like this.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. That makes a ton of sense. And then the final question I had is, and I guess really this is like confirming for anyone watching. Currently, it seems like the system requires the user to have some sense of like this incident affects these dashboards. You have that dashboard config where it groups things by, you know, you had finance user counts and things like that. how have you thought about that trade-off? And I guess this comes into the stuff you talked about of kind of future integration work, but there's obviously a world where someone puts in the schema or the affected table and the tool automatically figures out which dashboards are affected and things like that. How have you thought about the trade-offs there and how you might think about future work?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Having that dashboard configuration file is probably at the moment the most limiting scalability factor. So originally, when this was built, it was built to manage a handful of business critical dashboards. But again, as you said, in an ideal world, there's definitely a schema that exists that says what type of data is ingested into what dashboard, or even really when I mentioned at the end there, the integration with Spectacles. If Spectacles raises an error that there is a view or an Explore in Looker that has some type of issue, then it's fairly easy to see what dashboards are ingesting those and placing a banner on there. So yeah, the dashboard configuration file was our solution, but definitely I don't see it as a long-term solution. I see it as this suits our current use case. But yeah, I absolutely agree that in further iterations, we'd do away with that.
I think that's it for my questions. Anything I haven't asked that you've thought of as we've been going through this Q&A that you'd want to mention for the audience?
I don't think so from me, Michael.
No, nothing for me. I would say, yeah, if you are thinking about building yourself, yeah, those nitty-gritty slides from Jonny would be a very good guide. Especially, yeah, the whole issue with how to get that tile up to the top. Surprisingly, was one of the main sticking points in the project.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you both very, very much for joining. This has been a really interesting topic. It's clearly a thing that lots of people are impacted by. As Jonny, as you said, in an ideal world, there's no data incidents, but it's unlikely. And so the next best thing is just very well managed data incidents. There's very real time alerting, and there's pretty much real time kind of propagation of information around a organization, and particularly around a BI tool. So just want to thank you both for both building this and sharing this. It's been really, really interesting. So yeah, thank you. And for those watching this recording, appreciate you all joining. As I said at the top, we have another webinar in a week with the team at Paradigm. Again, kind of similarly focused on alerting and data quality in Looker and across BI tools, particularly focused around DBT. So we'll have that then, and hope to see you all then. But thank you again, Michael, Jonny. Thank you, everyone watching, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks, everyone.